Hello students, welcome to today's session on Database Management System. Myself Devi Priya, Assistant Professor in the Department of CSE at MCET. Let us discuss the outcome of the session. At the end of this unit, you will be able to construct the entity relationship model for obtaining the structure of any given database. At the end of this session, you will be able to summarize the differences between file system and the database systems. So we will compare the database and the file systems in this session. In the olden days, we might have used the manual system, which consists of pen and paper. So we have used paper for the record of the documents. And we are going for this manual system. The difficulty is that it is difficult to extract the information in short time. When you want to search for a particular information, you have to search it in the entire document, and it becomes difficult to extract in that particular short period of time. So there is a fading of content in that particular file system, manual file system, and hence it is difficult to store for long duration. So these are all the problems with the manual system, which consisted of pen and paper. Later, we got the file management system, which is also known as the file system, which is the organizing of the files. We have computerized files that stores all these data. So when you go for this file system, extracting the information is easier when it is compared with the manual system, and also there is no fading of data, and hence it is a permanent kind of storage. So these file system stands for a collection of application programs that performs the services for the end users, such as production of reports. Each of these application programs defines its own data and helps to manage the data of its own kind. So the conventional operating system is the Windows systems, which we are all familiar with, and files, it is a permanent storage of data. It stores permanent records, and we have different file formats like the documents, PDF, Excel, etc. So doc files, PNG files, JPG files, PPT, RAR files, zip file, PDF file, and together with that we have programming language files like .c, .cpp, .java files, which all you might have been familiar with. So this file based approach we'll discuss in detail now. So this is an earlier attempt to computerize the manual file system that we are using in the recent days. Consider an example like an organization might have the files which are in physical kind, that is to set up to hold the external and internal correspondence of the organization. So all these files, important files, must be stored with safety, and hence all these files will be locked inside the cabinets, which are stored in the locked rooms, and you might have the security personnel for storing this with safety. And in case of every home, you might have the filing system that will consist of the important receipts, warranties, invoices, and the bank statements. So now consider that you want to look up for something. Then when you go to the filing system, you will search for the document or the particular data in the system. What you will do, you will start from the beginning of the files. You will start at the first entry in the file, and will stop when we find the data which we have wanted, or will stop when we go for the end of the file. So this is the case when you want to search for some data. One alternative for this is you can use a indexing system, that is like the index of the books. You can go for the index system that you can randomly go for the particular item which you need based on the index. For example, you can have divisions in the file systems, or you can have separate folders that hold different types of items. So the objective of this filing folders is to have data which are logically related together. And we'll discuss the problems of these systems. In case of the manual filing system, this system will work well as long as the number of items to be stored in the file is small. And also it will be better to store if you have only the store and retrieve activities in that file. It will work better when you have only store and retrieval activities. But this file system will break down when you have cross reference, that is the folders of one file and other folders of other files are cross referenced, or when you want to process the information across these files and folders. So we have several disadvantages of all these file systems, that is data redundancy and inconsistency, difficulty in accessing the data, data isolation, integrity problems, atomicity problems, concurrent access anomalies, and the security problems. These disadvantages we will discuss now. Data redundancy, as you all know, redundancy means the repetition of data. Every programmer will create their own files, and all these files will have their own different structures. So when you use different programming languages in a particular file system or the system, you might have different structure of files, and some information may get duplicated in several places. So all these duplication leads to redundancy, which in turn leads to higher storage and access cost. There is a cost which is associated for the storage and access, so that will be increased when you go for this redundancy. In addition, all these redundancy may lead to inconsistency problem, that is the same data which is stored in different places will have different information. There is no agreement between the copies of the data, that you call it as data inconsistency. The next problem is difficulty in accessing the data. For this, consider an example like you have the list of students of a particular class, and you are given a task to find out the name of all the students who live in a particular postal code. So for this, you have two choices. Either you can manually obtain the list of students and extract the information whichever you need, or the other choice is to ask a programmer to write a application program for doing this activity. So after this, you might have got the list of students who are live in a particular postal code. Now you have an additional task to include only those students who have at least taken 60 credit hours. So this problem is more complicated now. So the conventional file processing environments do not have this opportunity to retrieve the data in a convenient and efficient manner. The next problem is data isolation. Because the data is scattered in various files, that too in different formats, writing new application programs to retrieve the data is very difficult. The problem is increased because you have the data which is scattered in various files, different files, and all these files are in different formats. The next is the integrity problem, which means that there are some constraints which are given by the developers or the persons to have some consistency in the database, and for having these constraints satisfied, the developers might enforce some constraints in the system, like adding some code for satisfying these constraints. When new constraints are added, it becomes difficult to change the programs to enforce them. So this is the problem with the normal file systems, and these problems will get increased when it involves several different data items, that too in different files. The next is the atomicity problem. That the atomicity is like, consider an example. If you want to transfer an amount of 500 from the account of person A to the account of person B, where the previous account balance is 5,000 and 2,000 respectively. The step 1 is to debit the account amount 500 from A, and after that your balance in the account A will be 4,500. Consider that at this particular point in time the system fails. What happens? After this, when you display the balance of account A and B, it will be 4500 and 2000 respectively, which is a failure. So it is to be essential that you have a consistency before and after. That is, both credit and debit should occur simultaneously, or it should not occur at all. That is, the fund transfer must be atomic. It must happen entirely or not at all. This is the atomicity problem. The next is concurrent access anomalies. In recent systems, more than one user is allowed to access a system to improve the performance of that particular system. In doing that, consider that two users U1 and U2 are accessing the same application, and you have a data item where the initial value of A is 50. When both users U1 and U2 are reading the data, there is no issue. Both of them will have the same data, 50 for this particular data item. And if one particular user is writing and at the same time the other person is reading, they'll have different data accessed. So this is the case where user A is writing 45 and user 2 is reading the same data A, which is 50. So this is inconsistent. Similarly, when user U1 is reading the data 45, another user have written as 90, where there is a inconsistency. And also you have security problems, like not every user of the system should be able to access all the data. You have a university where the payroll personnel need to see only the particular part of the data that has the financial information. They should not have any access to information of the academic records. The office staffs have to access only the financial information, whereas the academic staff should have access only to the academic data and not the financial data. So all these are the security issues in case of accessing this data. So we have discussed several problems that has to be rectified in case of file system, and in order to overcome the limitations of the file based approach, we have moved for this databases. So the problem is that the definition of data is embedded in the application programs rather than being stored separately and independently. This is one problem with the file system. That is, the data is embedded, put together in the application programs. So if there is a change in data or the application program, both are dependent on each other. So that is one problem. The next is that there is no control over the access and the manipulation of data that is being imposed by the application programs. Because of two factors, all these are the limitations of the file based approach. So these two factors turn out to be the limitations of the file based approach. That is why we are moving towards the database systems. So let us discuss this as a comparison between the file based and the database management system. In case of file management system, it is general, easy to use, and to store the general files with less security and constraints, whereas in case of database management system, it is used with high security constraints, and the data redundancy is more in this file system, whereas it is less in database management system. And in case of inconsistency, it is more in file systems than the database systems. You cannot achieve centralization in case of this file systems, whereas the centralization is achieved since you store only a single copy of the data in the databases. And when the user locates the physical address of the files to access the data in the file management system, here in case of database management system, the user is not aware of where this data is physically stored, and the security is low in case of the file management system, and this security is high by having some constraints in this database management system that will be familiar when moving towards the topics. The file management system stores data in unstructured manner. So you have isolated data files. Each of these files are having different formats and they are stored in different places. Whereas in case of database management system, this stores structured data with well-defined constraints and interrelation. So, as a summary, we have discussed what is a file-based approach and what are the disadvantages of all these file-based approach. Like, you have listed out 7 different disadvantages and how this can be rectified with the database management system, and we have discussed a comparison between this file system and the database systems. So I have referred the textbook Database System Concepts 6th edition of this particular system. Thank you.